Welcome back to day 112 of our chess journey to 1500 ELO on chess.com. Let's just jump ahead into our game here and get started. We're playing Victor 18 Senior from International. We'll go 1d4 and see how they respond. We get a Queen's Gambit. Our opponent takes. And now, how do we respond? Let's go with this more defensive variation, I guess. We could have went up, but I have not quite studied it, and I know there is some theory you should know. For example, following something like this. Or at least I think so. Our opponent allows us to take the pawn, so I think we'll go on ahead and do just that. The knight comes out. Do we bring the knight out perhaps? Could be an option, just because this diagonal here might be annoying at some point. We could bring the knight out and prepare castling, but I don't think we have to rush castling in this position. My intuition here tells me to play this. A3 might be a move though, this might be a move, this might be a move. Either of those moves might be okay. I think we have a plethora of options. Let's come out with, or is this actually best? Maybe not. I think this kind of a setup might be better paired with something like this, in which case we don't quite want the knight here on c3. So let's maybe come up here with this knight and prepare castling. I think this might be our way forwards. We transposed out of the old line or variation into, I guess, just a normal Queen's Gambit accepted here. The knight comes out. We can castle. We can come up here, taking away this thing from those moves, which I think might be a good idea, because this forces this bishop here to develop to a suboptimal position perhaps. Or, well, this diagonal might not be bad, but it might not be the best developing square either. So let's come to a3. It's a slow move, but I think it's decent. Could have castled and allowed this, after which this would have been bad for our opponent. Or, well, in response to the check, we would have had to go here rather. So this is played. Might intend to play this. Let's have a quick look here. The reason I don't quite want to push this is because we give up this square here for the rest of the game. Let's say we go here and allow this. I guess we could drop back. Our opponent will come up, we might come up here. And I think our game might look something like this. Which I think is probably okay. Might not be bad. It's just I was a bit worried about this move. Is there any danger here? Obviously, the rook steering contest might not be ideal. So let's say we get this, maybe this, pushing here and coming back maybe. This might be our way forwards if that happens. So let's come up. Expecting this, but a5 might also be a move. The bishop could just come out as well. We see this. Do we want to come here? What is the difference here? I guess it might lie in the defense of this pawn by our rook. If we go here, we can kind of control this, but we could get pushed back here in some positions. So there is merit and there are downsides to each and every move, as is typical in chess. Let's have a quick look at this, and the problem here is I don't quite like this coming with tempo. And here with our bishop and b2 we'll always defend our a3 pawn. So I think we'll drop all the way back and keep our goals along this diagonal. And then I guess long term we might be staring down at the king, and we might be adding more pieces if we're allowed to. Now this square here is weak. It's not easy to get there for the time being for our opponent, at least not with a knight. The bishop does come out here, signaling our opponent wants to castle. I would like to come here, but castling might just take priority first. This covers this square, covers this jump for our opponent. So let me have a quick look at this first. Is this annoying? Is it annoying? Maybe. Because now we can't go here, but we could go here first maybe, and then go here, so it's not necessarily bad. Yes, let's just castle. Our opponent is going to castle. If this is played, as I mentioned, I think we go bishop to b2. So here I'd argue our position is probably better because of this pawn on the c-file, but the e-pawn push might make it easier for our opponent, although it might not be the best position still. This knight here remains undefended. But we can't easily target it, as of now at least. I just argue for developing our pieces here, doubling up rooks maybe, and having normal development. If this is played, we just take. This pawn is still not going forwards, I think. And I think we just have a slightly better position because of this pawn, and I think our activity that's to come. Our queen, I was looking at this, doesn't do a whole lot, makes it difficult to double the rooks. I was thinking, okay, we could attack this, but we don't quite have anything to double up with for a double threat, and this knight covers this anyways. The bishop comes onto the diagonal here, as it was to be expected. I guess we will just open up here for the rooks. We'll have a quick look at alternative moves, but I do not see a whole lot. The queen might move. I think this is probably better. Now if this knight moves, we have this covering our knight, so we are not quite threatened here. So I think we should be good. This is a potential pawn break as well. We'll have to see when we get there. Most likely this might be played instead though. Although this I think might be better. So maybe it will be played instead. We don't have a great response to a5 here. At least I don't think so. If it's played, then what? Well, it's not played, which I think is a good sign. So here, I think queen to e2 first. So if this is ever played, we've got eyes on this, and our opponent might not like the following position. So I think this is our way of developing while taking the sting out of this natural threat by our opponent. Now, as I did mention, the c-file might be our goal here and our way of coming forwards. This square here is quite well controlled. Might see a knight jump in here. This could be played as well, although here we have the option of trading. Instead, our opponent moves the knight to g6 here. I guess maybe creating some stuff here with the knights, the queen and the bishops. Is there a threat yet? I can't quite see a threat here. We've got this diagonal covered. This does not strike me as a problem. If this is played, and we go here, is this annoying? Here I think we take, and we've got ourselves covered with the knight, or maybe not. Yeah, we do, because this knight covers our other knight. Okay. So then I think our a-rook might want to stay there defending if something happens. So let's bring this a-rook over and hit this pawn. We still have 7 minutes, so we should have time to defend against an attack here. This seems to be a good plan. This kind of blocks our bishop, although it's still blocked by the pawn though, but that's just for the time being. Still, I think this looks good. This, I think, is welcome, or a welcome sight rather, because it takes away the sting from a5, which did look annoying in some positions. So let's just double. I'm looking at a response here like this, but I don't conceive or find it any threatening at least. So we'll come here. This pawn is well defended, so it's not as though we are threatening to take it anytime soon, but it remains a target, and our pieces are getting more active by coming up here anyways, which I think is a pretty welcome sight. As I mentioned, if this is ever played, we'll just take. Should open up both of our bishops. So that would be fantastic for us. Absolutely fantastic. Can we force the issue ourselves? I don't think so. Seems like it loses a pawn. Our opponent went for this. This hits this. If this is played, this is not ideal, so we might be forced to play this and maybe come up with the rook. Which I don't think is the end of the world. Definitely not. I think this seems to be slightly forced. The bishop comes in here, and well, the bishop doesn't do a whole lot yet, but I guess it'll do its part later on. Our knight here on f3 covers the queen's entrance into the position. Let's come up. We will be looking to play this. After this, we might even just try to force the bishop off. If this gets annoying, we'll have to see. This and this. This knight here can't quite coordinate with any of the bishops. Well, it could target here, but takes, and I don't think we're under any immediate problems or threats here, although I might misevaluate stuff. Let's have a quick look at this first. If we take and our opponent comes in with the queen, this, and this will be threats. And then what happens if we play h3? Could we come here? Or they could come there. And there is a new threat here. Could play g3. That's pushing pawns. It's not ideal, but it might have to be done. We could end up with a pawn structure like this eventually. Is this any good? I don't think this is good actually. I think this has to be a slight mistake. Our opponent trades off their better bishop for ours. This opens up, but does our opponent want a million moves to come in with the rooks? I don't think we'll give them the time. This forces this, and still this pawn is a target. And now we can come in here because our opponent loses control over the diagonal. So let's take. Our opponent will take in response. We'll double rooks here. A knight here might become annoying, but this knight can't get there easily at all. This pawn can't be pushed, then we take it, at least for the time being. Now the light squared bishop is gone. We don't have to be incredibly aware, or rather scared of light squared weaknesses, so g3 might become a move for us. The queen comes up, the queen does indeed come up. What's our best response here? I might prefer going here, taking away this, while also just killing this, and there is no infiltration and coordination between the queen and bishop. This might not be necessary, but I think it's just a decent improving move, considering our current position. Now we need a better square, I think, for this bishop. It's not been doing a whole lot of this game. We might come up here and threaten the pawn. This is a long maneuver. This isn't a threat because of the knight. Otherwise, takes, and takes might have been bad. But now let's just come here. Which I think looks good. And then the bishop here looks to be in a good position as well. This, and well, I guess the knight could come here and kick our rook out. But that's backwards progress, I guess. The piece comes back defensively, there is no attack, and our opponent invests tempi, while we still have our eyes on the pawn. Okay, so what do we do about this bishop? And where does our queen go? All good questions, I think. Could we maybe come back here, leaving this, defending this, keeping eyes here, and maybe looking to play on the a file? I think this might be a good idea. It's the best idea I'm seeing here. So let's go for it. This bishop can't move, at least not for the time being. And it can't quite leave this diagonal either, because of the pawn. So it has to stay here, and if it moves, well, that's no good for our opponent. Here. Let's say our opponent takes and we take. This pawn might be hanging. With this, and I guess our opponent has this move, which I didn't consider. Can we get our knight here? Thing is, I don't quite love this knight's positioning. It's tied to the queen, so maybe coming back here and jumping in this way might be better. I think so. Let's improve the knight's positioning. Because if we ever moved the queen, this looked bad. It would have dropped the knight. Now, I guess we might have the option here of coming in here, as long as we don't trap our rook, of course. And from this square, we have a few options at least. And the queen comes up here. which I don't think necessarily does a whole lot, but it might prepare to move the bishop. In which case this pawn falls though. We could try to look for a queen trade. But does it favor us? I don't quite know even. I think we'll go for this, get the knight up, it's defended by the queen. If this is played, I don't see a way of following up for our opponent. Especially with h6 being played, so the rook can't be lifted in here and it can't come here. Okay, our opponent is launching a pawn at us. We can't come here. Would be suicide. At the very least, it loses a pawn. Can we come here? What happens here? Nothing good as far as I can see. Maybe this. And we take away our pawns, or our opponent's pawn mobility there. I think this might be good. There are some light squared weaknesses, but they're not easy to exploit. At least I don't see any good ways of doing so. Takes. This doesn't work, this is covered by the queen. Takes. There is some opening up of the bishop here, so we'll have to be careful. We'll definitely have to be careful. I think our opponent here is playing quite well today, so we're having a fantastic game so far. We have to improve our bishop. It's not easy though. It's currently entombed behind our own pawns. Could we look to come around like this? Not quite. If we go here, this traps the rook. So we'll have to be careful. But careful is our middle name. Or well, it could be. Although it's not our middle name just yet. The knight is also a piece I do not quite know where I'd like to go. Don't want to go here because honestly, well, that might work if we take with the rook. I wouldn't have wanted to close down our diagonal, or our file rather, staring down at this pawn. The queen comes in here. Can we just mirror the move and kind of force it back? I think this might be a good move. And if our opponent wants to trade, I think that's going to be good. Now there is no sacrifice on any square because we take the queen. Still don't see a great spot for our bishop here. It's kind of crying. Maybe a slow maneuver might be good. Our opponent takes, but now I think our king is forever safe. I'll not be jinxing it, but at least I'm hoping that's the case. This pawn might be weak. We might be looking to jump in here at some point, although we would have to decide on a way of compromising our pawn structure. Our rook gets hit, I think we'll jump back here, or drop back here, so we still have the option of playing like this perhaps. This bishop is miserable, as I've been mentioning a few times, but it's just kind of funny to see how useless it is right now. We've got all our pawns on dark squares, so it would be ideal, I think, to trade off our dark squared bishop. So we've got control, or well, we don't actually have a light squared bishop to even out our pawns being on this color complex. This pawn here is pushed finally. This, and there is going to be pressure against our A pawn. I think I'd like to play here, and if this is played, I guess taking with the knight might be a good idea. Actually not. Let's say we go here, 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 and the knight has to stay defending the pawn. But then the rook comes in, it's still not going to be good. Might just take. Although I do not love this position at all. I actually dislike it quite much. But let's jump in. The knight at least gets improved here. We might be looking at some forks. At least this blocks the bishop for now, so there is no threat of taking, unless our opponent wants to sack a rook here. But we have this rook here as well, so I think we should be good. Now I think this is a decent threat, unless this is played, in which case this drops. No, it doesn't quite drop a pawn. Or well, it doesn't work out tactically, because there is this, and if we just take, this is another fork even, so that's not ideal. So let's say this is played, we come here, our opponent takes, what happens if we take and they take? No, we just end up down one pawn perhaps. Not necessarily ideal. Seems our opponent wants to double like this, which is fine. I think I'd like to centralize the king. Was looking at playing here, but I didn't quite see a concrete follow-up. So for the time being, we'll just improve our position where and when we can. This will likely be played. We don't have this, as it drops the pawn. What does this accomplish? The knight can't come here, and this is defended. Our opponent might intend to play this, followed by this. So this actually becomes a good move by our opponent. We might have to play this to keep eyes on e3. Which I did not want to play at all, but sometimes you have to make a compromise. Struggling to find moves here quickly enough. I guess. No, this. I forgot about the rook. Oh, this is just horrendously bad. I thought this forces the bishop to either trade and break apart the pawns or move away and give up the pawn. Our opponent does not see our threat. Our threat is dodged. Or well, our threat being us losing a piece for fun, I guess. At least for free. The pawns are broken apart, although they didn't have to be. I think our opponent made a couple of mistakes, which is good for us. Now we can play up here. Can't quite come in here and target the pawns. I'd like to double up here and get some activity. This might be played. I even expect it to be played. But I don't think it's bad for us. Takes. Our opponent is going to play trying to get a passed pawn. I think it's okay for us. We can always drop back with our rook here if needs be, once we have this trade. Takes, and now we actually get in, which I think looks good. If this is played, this pawn becomes a target. We could come up here. We have the first axis down here as well. And luckily we can't easily target this. This pawn is hanging unless, or well, and as long as we don't move our bishop. I think this will be played. And here my intuition tells me moving the king up is better. But then if this is played, then we come here. Okay, let's try and see where we get. If this is played, it's not a problem, I think, because then the rook can't get behind, but if the king moves, we should come here first. But the king comes here. Now I think we go here. And we could be looking at getting in front of the pawn. And then we can try to pick up the remaining weaknesses over here. If the pawn pushes, we take. If this is played, which it is, as I mentioned, I think this has to be our move. And then I don't see our opponent's move, because the knight here is dominated by our pawns. This can't be pushed, the king can't come forwards. Maybe this and this pawn is doomed to fall. Or this might be good for us as well. Let's first pin this. So if the knight moves, we get the rook and the pawn. and then we can come here and pick up some goodies. This is our threat now. Knight comes back here. But now I think... no, we can't go there. Maybe coming up here might be a good idea. The knight is back to where it was. Meaning it does not have any threats it did not have before. We've got this covered. Defended. Now this is attacked. If this is played, there might be some idea here of coming down this way, but we've got threats here and even more threats. I think we should be in a better position here, although it's not always easy to tell. And this loses a pawn for our opponent. Importantly, this comes with a check. We can come here and hit this pawn, and this pawn will fall as well. So I think we should be in a winning position. Our opponent drops another pawn with a check, and surely this has to be good. Now this will be lost. But considering what we just won, that's not a problem. I think I'd like to come here with the king is what I meant to say. Preparing to get our rook here maybe. Or let's say we get here and this is played. Well, then we can actually defend. So I think we are in time to take this pawn, and if this is played, we can defend like this. If we're able to trade rooks, we are going to automatically win, which should be great. This is almost a checkmate, but there is d3. The king can't coordinate an attack against this pawn with the rook. Let's come here actually. No, maybe not. Let's come here, I think. I was looking at playing this, preparing to start pushing, but I didn't quite see it working out the way I wanted to. But now maybe? Can we come here? The king is forced here, and then we can push this pawn. Making progress. That's what we want to see. But if we push this and the king comes here, I guess we can push this again, so that might not be bad. Actually, we can push this twice immediately. We get checked, which is fine. I guess we'll keep on pushing this, and we come here, and if takes, well, then takes, and we're gonna lose a pawn, but with the 2 pawns, we should be winning there. this should just be a matter of time. At least I'm hoping so. This is difficult to defend for our opponent at least. Let's come down here, maybe preparing to push, keeping our defense here and allowing ourselves some chances of moving around. Whenever we have the chance to, I'd like to push this pawn up. Like now, for example. And if this is played, I guess we dodge and prepare this move. Now we should probably be getting a queen. Our stuff is defended. This forces the rook to defend from behind, or from in front, I mean, and this should seal the deal. If this is played, we have to play this first before playing this move. One last check, and we would come back. And now there is nothing for our opponent. One last trick on the board. Honestly, let's just allow our opponent to check and take the queen. We will still be in a winning position. We can just promote this queen. And there should be no counterplay. Our opponent apparently wants to go for a stalemate instead, I guess, because they did not want to take the queen. We will not allow any stalemates, so we'll just be pushing this pawn up. I don't know what's quicker, but I guess getting a queen should probably be quicker. Our opponent resigns, and we get our win today. Thanks for the game. Well played to Victor 18 Senior. This was a fantastic game. We are up to 1486 points again. Let's jump on ahead into the game review and have a look. Feeling happy with today's game, but Stockfish might not might not agree rather. It did find some mistakes in our play, which is quite natural I think for such a long game. Still, I'm happy to see 88.3% for us. Our opponent played with 81. And the game ratings averaged 2000 this game, which honestly I could have guessed because this felt like a pretty high level game. Let's have a quick look here. This was all normal stuff. Here we should have apparently went up. Honestly, I can't quite tell why. Might be because this controls a4. Or there might be stuff countering a jump here. Let's see if we follow the opponent's best moves here. Why is this not better? Oh, this is just normal stuff, but why is this as good as it is then? Following the best moves, it kind of evens out, getting close. Honestly, I don't quite see the big difference. It's not always easy to evaluate the 0.x% difference in not rating, but in evaluation with some moves. Oh, this was an absolute mistake. Why? Oh, I guess it does make sense, because from this point on we never really got to do a whole lot with this bishop. This, I guess, provided us with more options. I thought we could just be looking at those pawns opening up at some point, which, well, they did, but not for a long time, and our bishop remained entombed on a2. Our opponent didn't capitalize. Apparently this is the way of just equalizing, and this additional move blunders back some advantage. Well, we did play a few more decent moves. Apparently this was good. I would not have played it. It does open up stuff here, but this seemed more concrete to me. Or, well, it seemed like a better positional move. This was a square, I guess, for the sake of jumping in here and preventing this. And then I guess the bishop should have had to be remaneuvered like this, maybe. And our pieces were in better positions there, which I can see in hindsight. It's not always easy to come up with the absolute best move according to the engine. Apparently the difference is slight here, but our advantage was gone again at this point. And this was apparently horrendously bad. Let's evaluate this. Oh, there was this move, which I didn't see. And neither did our opponent, I guess. And here it gets difficult to play. The knight is hanging, and if, let's say, we try to defend it, our position just falls apart, and this is bye-bye. This was bad. Apparently we should have sacked a pawn here, which was not even the best way of playing for our opponent. Oh, because we win this pawn at the end of the line, so it's not really a sacked pawn. Luckily, our opponent didn't see the best move. We didn't either. We had some inaccuracies. Then we had some more good moves. This. This should have lost us the game. I don't know at all why our opponent just did not take. But I guess I'm happy to see they didn't. Such a bizarre move. That's not characteristic of how I typically make moves. At least I don't hope you think so. At least I do not hope that is the case. Well, we got to survive, luckily. We have some good moves going, and I think, yeah, all best moves. This was okay as well. Should have apparently just taken this and gobbled up the pawns. I was a bit more afraid and thought, let's be more concrete in dealing with our opponent's threats. This was fantastic for us. Our opponent misevaluated stuff. Apparently this was actually best. I do not quite see how, when it just won us all the pawns. And here it's just a matter of conversion. I'm glad to see we actually did play all the best moves for a while at least. This was good. All good. And here we would have went up with the pawn and gotten a queen, and the checkmate there would have been quick and easy. So well, that's our game for today. Thanks to Victor18 Senior for the game. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye bye.